Well, we are absolutely thrilled to have joining us for Growing Global the chairman of the board and the CEO of Southwest Airlines, Gary C. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us today.
Debbie, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Well, certainly we want to know what you think and what business leaders think as governments and companies start getting back to business as much as they can. What are you looking for, hoping for, expecting as far as improvements go as we're heading into this near future?
Well, that's the key word, improvements. I think we're all hopeful that we'll continue to see very sound, solid federal policy, supporting our economy. Um, it's interesting. You look at the broader U.S. Economy, and there are winners and losers in that. I'm a guitar aficionado, and my wife was telling me this morning that Fender guitar is recording all-time record sales. So I think it's just interesting how people are adjusting, to this crazy time. But obviously, we're hoping that consumers get back spending in a broad way. We're hoping for continuing improvements in employment, which is key to that consumer spending. Hoping that corporate business confidence returns and investments start taking hold again. But our assumption is that we're going to continue to see a pretty sluggish economy here, certainly through 2020. And then we've got reasonable, I think, modest expectations for improvement in 2021. I think a lot of it, Debbie, is just predicated on what does one believe about the end of this pandemic. And we're hopeful that we'll see a vaccine. We've got pretty darn good news, on that front. See a vaccine by the end of this year, and that by mid next year we see sort of a functional end to the pandemic, and then behaviors begin to change in a much more rapid fashion in the second half of next year. I think that's going to be key in really getting our economy back to life. But in the meantime, I think the government support is also critical. The CARES Act kept us, in my opinion, out of a depression in this country. So I'm grateful that we live in a country that has the wherewithal to step in and provide that kind of liquidity and stimulus. But we're not done, and we're not through this yet. So hopeful that the two parties can work together to get something done here, to get us through the end of this year and well into next year.
Well, you mentioned some of the business winners. Certainly Zoom has been a huge winner in this pandemic.
Yes.
We have certainly seen the benefits of technology and allowing people to stay home and work remotely to protect their health. Some people love it, some people don't. It has definitely had an impact on business travel. So looking ahead, as things do start to improve, do you see business travel improving, or do you think that a lot of companies are going to see this as the new normal, working remotely?
That's another thing that I'll just use the word again that I'm grateful for. The technology has enabled us to actually function in this environment. And I just marvel at what our company's been able to do, but we're not alone. Companies around the globe have been able to move very rapidly to a virtual world and to conduct business remotely. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, as you point out, in our business, we want people to not live virtually. We want them to live in the real world and to get on an airplane and go somewhere. People want to travel, and I think it's whether it's for fun, for leisure, for personal reasons, or for business. There's no question that I think we've all experienced that there are alternatives to traveling. But, it kind of reminds me of September 11th. There were a lot of pundits that said people will never travel again. And then you have the advent of the internet back in the 1990s, and business travel will go down, and every time that proved to be wrong. So I think it will be a long recovery, and history would show that in a recession, business travel is cut very sharply, much more sharply than consumer travel. And it's a very long recovery period. And my recollection is '08, '09, it was even longer than normal, probably 5, 6, 7 years. But it did recover, and it's expanded to all-time highs as of 2019. Same was true in 2001, same true back in 1991. At this point, I would expect a very long recovery period for the reasons that you mentioned, and on top of that, we just have an economic recession underway. So businesses will get back on the road, and it will be different, but nonetheless, I think you'll see a very robust travel again at some point.
You mentioned recession and 2008. Are there any similarities, do you think, between the recession of 2008 and what's happening here in 2020 that could be helpful to businesses trying to plan their way into the future, or policymakers even?
There are some similarities, but it does feel like there's some pretty significant differences. But certainly in terms of the learnings from that recession, it was the worst one in my lifetime, and arguably the worst recession since the Great Depression. So it was tough, and it was rough, and it was a financial crisis, as we all know, and therefore, the healing needed to take place primarily in the financial industry. Obviously, we were all impacted because it was difficult for us to access capital during that time period. So I don't think that the tools that the policymakers used then apply as directly this time. But it at least provides a bit of a blueprint for the need to have a sovereign step in and keep the system from failing. So I'm an advocate for that. One could argue that we should simply let businesses fail and avoid having a zombie-like environment where you have a lot of companies who haven't made necessary adjustments to the new world, and you're simply sustaining an inefficient industry or sector without having winners emerge from that. But I think in these really extreme scenarios, and this is the worst we've ever faced, certainly since World War II, and I think I do applaud the federal government, certainly the Congress and the administration, for stepping in quickly to do the CARES Act. Whether it was done perfectly, sector by sector, is certainly debatable, but it kept the country out of depression, and I do think that was a learning from 2008, and I think it's worked pretty well so far. I think the challenge is what we were looking at in March and April. It was a wild guess on what trajectory this virus would take, and then what effect it would have on the economy. Now, 6, 7 months in, well, we have a much better idea, and we're not close to being out of this yet. So, back to my earlier point, we'll need to make sure that we put the adequate support in place. Otherwise, I fear that the CARES Act 1 was a waste, because you'll simply have spent that money, and now you'll have a lot of failures. Well, what we need to do is make sure that we avoid all the failures. And you take a company like Southwest, and there are thousands of examples like this. We were very healthy coming into this, and so was the rest of the airline industry, for that matter. But for this virus, we'd be having an all-time record year. So it would be a shame to let industries, sectors, companies, absolutely dissolve into oblivion through no fault of their own. That would be a very, very difficult thing to recover from. huge job losses, and so we need to do everything we can to avoid that.
I want to get back a little bit to travel, and we talked about business travel, and we touched a little bit on consumer travel. I think that people are tired of being home and they do want to get away. They do want to travel, but what do you think it's going to take to get people to do that again? And are you sensing a pent-up demand for travel on the consumer level?
Yeah, very much so. And again, I'm a believer that this too shall pass. If you go back to the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, 1919, it was followed by the Roaring Twenties. So this too shall pass. We put a man on the moon 50 years ago, so we can defeat this virus. It's just going to take some sacrifice. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of effort. But people definitely are ready to get out and do things. They're ready to have events. They're ready to go to sporting events. They're ready to go to concerts. So at least there are elements of our economy that have reopened to a degree, but certainly not back to normal. You just look at the school experiences here this fall, the NFL, how the NBA is working. We're not back to normal. Maybe a year from now, we'll have events that people can travel for. So I do think that's part of the answer to your question, is the events and the comfort in gathering together needs to be restored. So it's going to take a while, and that's what needs to happen, is people need to be comfortable. What is encouraging is, at this point, our business is about roughly 30 to 35% of what it was a year ago. Now, back in the really bleak days of late March, early April, it was 2% of a year ago. So we've at least recovered to the degree that we have. And what I find is that when I talk to customers, they have almost universally told me, I was nervous about flying, and once I got to the airport and was served by your employees, got on the airplane, I was comfortable. So we're getting very high marks from the customers who are flying in terms of the experience. And I think that that word is getting out. Obviously, we've invested a lot with a multi-layered approach to making sure that the flight experience is safe. But fundamentally, it's back to what we were discussing earlier. We need a vaccine. We need to functionally end the pandemic. And then I think people will broadly be comfortable that they can get back to normal behaviors. And that's just going to take a while. But at least we're seeing gradual improvements. And I think that's encouraging. We are largely seeing leisure travel, very little business travel. When we talk to our very large corporate managed accounts, where we can have a conversation about what they're doing and what their plans are, that business is off substantially. And a lot of companies have rules, thou shalt not travel right now. And it's not so much because we can conduct business virtually and it's more efficient. It is more, we just don't want to take the risk of having someone get infected. And that makes perfect sense to me. Again, it just gets back to let's crush this virus, and then we can get all this behind us.
Well, Southwest has been extremely important at St. Louis Lambert International Airport, obviously the #1 carrier, and that has been increasing each year. Can you give us any insight into how St. Louis might play into future plans for Southwest?
Well, I love St. Louis, and Southwest loves St. Louis, and again, it's a real honor to be a part of the program here this year. I started in the 1980s, right at the time that TWA was acquiring Ozark, of all things. And TWA had a huge hub there, and we were very small. I think after that merger or acquisition, we were the second largest airline in the market even back in the 1980s, but we were a little bitty, compared to big TWA. What's interesting, of course, is American acquired a TWA and the hub is no longer there. But I would argue that St. Louis is better off with Southwest Airlines as your hometown carrier, because you get more people flying in and out of St. Louis than you do with a hub carrier who are simply transiting people through St. Louis. So at our peak last year, we had 134 daily departures, which easily put St. Louis in our top 10, and 49 nonstop destinations. So hopefully that's an indication of our commitment and really our love affair with St. Louis. We have a very good route network. We have excellent people in the market, and excellent relationship with you have a fantastic airport director, and the political leadership we enjoy working with very much. So once we get past this crisis, I would expect that St. Louis will continue to be a very strong point of service for us, with a very significant focus, and one that I would hope we can continue to grow for many, many years. So it's a great market. It's a great city. I'm a lifelong Texan, but I have a real affinity for Missourians. So we're just very grateful to be a part of the community.
Well, now that we know how you feel about St. Louis, let me ask you this, because Chicago Midway and Nashville are both big Southwest airports as well. So what can we do to be even better than them in Southwest size?
Well, you have a great community. You have, I think, what makes for a great travel destination is when you can drive traffic both ways. So you have a thriving community, which will generate business travel, leisure travel from St. Louis, and then make yourself as an attractive destination as possible, so that people want to come to St. Louis. And when you have the flow going both directions, that just makes for a very, very powerful airport opportunity or airline opportunity. And I feel like St. Louis has that. Now, what is interesting with Southwest compared to the three legacy hub and spoke carriers is we have a lot of cities that are like St. Louis, that are like Nashville, that are like Chicago, because we don't build giant hubs and connect you like a package, through a central sorting area. We have a point-to-point network system, and we try to have more nonstop itineraries for our customers than our competitors do. And that means that we have a lot of cities that have a lot of flights, as opposed to just a handful of cities with a giant number of flights. So Delta in Atlanta has 1,000 daily departures. I imagine you've been to Atlanta and you know what that experience is like. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just we don't have anything approaching 1,000 daily departures. Our largest operations are in the 200 daily departures, because most of our customers don't connect. And most of our customers fly nonstop. Therefore, we need fewer flights. So it helps it's more efficient in terms of the airline to operate that way. We just have fewer revenue opportunities on a given flight if we don't have as many itineraries as a hub and spoke carrier does. So all that has to be balanced properly. And we're expert at that. In fact, Southwest is the only airline in the world that we're sort of a category of one in operating that way. So I don't think there's anything that you all need to do. Just expect that you'll see large numbers of flights in Denver, in LA, in Oakland, in Chicago Midway, in Nashville, Baltimore, on and on and on, which is very different than Brand X. And St. Louis is right in the mix of all of those. So you all will definitely continue to be a prime focus area for us.
Well, one last question before we let you go. It's always big news in St. Louis when Southwest adds another direct flight to somewhere. Do you want to break any news here today for us?
I will look forward to that. Let me tell you, right now, our overall flight activity is down about 40%, from a year ago for all the reasons that we know. That is a more robust schedule, though, than any of our competitors are offering. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that during these tough times that we still serve you and your community very well, meaning that you can get where you need to go. So we've been very careful about trying to avoid eliminating itineraries, even if it's on a connecting basis right now. We've lost a lot of traffic on our existing city pairs, and I would call that depth in a market. So pick St. Louis to Dallas, or St. Louis to Chicago, St. Louis to Florida, whatever it might be. We still have those lanes open, but there are just fewer people traveling. So I do think that we have an opportunity here this year and next year to add more destinations and increase the breadth of our system and generate more revenue, which will be helpful to our business. It would also be helpful to the St. Louis business community. So we are planning to add Miami International Airport to our route map, following along that strategy, as well as Palm Springs. And so when we're doing these things, we will always have an eye on St. Louis to see, when we're adding these, if we can't get a nonstop to begin with, can we at least have an itinerary where you can fly, hopefully your favorite airline, to these new destinations. And the neat thing about Southwest, and I guess the thing that's frustrating about 2020, is that we had all kinds of expansion opportunities opening up to us over the last 5 years with investments and transformations that we were making. So we were serving about 100 markets and have the potential to add in North and South America another 50 to 70 more, and quite a few right here in the lower 48, so to speak. So stay tuned on all of that, and I think if we can just get all this behind us, we'll get back to buying airplanes, hiring employees, adding flights, and welcoming you on board to a very safe and clean flight experience.
Well, we will have some people flying Southwest from St. Louis because we have a Southwest gift card to give away before the end of this program. Gary C. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today at Growing Global 2020. It's been a pleasure.
Debbie, and thank you again for having us. Appreciate all you all do.